great to be back at DevTO. I'm Alex Stobe, not Stobe or Strobelite or anything else that you can mess up with my name. This presentation is going to be quite purposely pirated. It's an idea that I've stolen, and I actually hope that a lot of you steal too. I hope that nobody's offended by that, except Amon. Amon, I hope you're hope you're offended by the pirating. It's going to be quick. The concept I'd like to run by is it's going to seem really quite rudimentary if you've already been looking at, say, getting funding or something like that. And there's way too much information for me to actually go into any proper depth here. So I just want to give a quick high level, and hopefully, again, you find something that you can steal and go forward a little bit more. A lot of you are in a position where at some point in your career, you're going to end up with too many options. As a lot of people know, it's a bit of a talent market, and at some point you're going to need to go out and have a few exploratory conversations with a couple of companies. It's a little like dating. It can get a little overwhelming. Some people can even get a little nervous, which is fine, but if you're looking at joining a startup, why not go out and have those conversations by stealing a framework from another person who's in the same position, a venture capitalist. A venture capitalist has only so much money that they can invest in all of these startups. You have something far more precious, your time. You can't invest in 10 companies, you can only invest in one. So why not take a couple of pages out of the VC handbook and create a framework that helps you look at whether or not that startup is going to be successful and they're going to give you what you actually need. Three main things, again, at a very high level that you want to look at: the team, the business, and your personal return on experience. I say return on experience again because there's only one of you, you've only got one life to live. You're putting all of your time and effort into this startup, and you want to get something out of it, something that goes beyond what a VC looks for. But well, I guess first of all, why does everybody want to join a startup these days? Why did it get so sexy? I mean, I always hear people talking about, I want to have passion for the projects, or I want to have a great team, or then there's this other thing that, especially when kids are really junior, they start talking about. It'll come to me. But there's something else that people should be looking for, especially if you're earlier on in your career. You should be thinking a little bit more about, okay, what happens if this company goes under? If I'm joining this company and I'm getting a pretty crappy salary, what am I going to walk away with? And ideally that should be, okay, if this company goes under, when I leave here, I'm actually going to be more marketable than when I started. And that's what's going to give me a better sort of return on investment, a better return on experience. So joining a startup is trying to figure out, how do I get both the best short-term kind of income, and how do I get the best education? Now, the best education, that's going to be something that's going to be deeply personal to you, probably going to be the technologies you want to look at and all that jazz. But how do we figure out, okay, how are we most likely to actually get a decent payoff and not end up in a bad situation, especially, again, if we're going for a startup or how these days even a larger company could theoretically go under. Now, especially going to startups, how hard is it to spot the revenue model? Is it something when you talk to the founders, they go, yeah, about that? Or do they go, oh, no, we've got a compound annual growth rate of well over 25%. And hopefully that CAGR is specifically in revenue and not just users. If it is users, actually, especially if it is users, go, okay, that was a really, really good answer, great growth rate, but are you profitable? And most of them will say no, and that's perfectly fine. It usually takes 5 years. That was the old adage for a startup to get going, but then you want to figure out, how are you funded? The VC funding is very popular, and you know what, it can be very good, especially if you can ask them certain questions like, okay, why did you take that funding? What are you using for? Are there specific growth plans? I mean, is that how you're paying my salary? Personally, and hell, a lot of my clients will hate me for this, but I think a bootstrapped company says a lot. So if you do see that, figure out, okay, why are you so frugal? Well, can you pay me? That's a whole other story there. And if they're really early stage, or if they just jumped the gun and got funding, figure out why. What do they think they're going to do with it? Why do they think their business is going to be really successful? There are a lot of founders out there, and I mean, it's perfectly normal. People get really, really excited. But you go enjoy these startups, and maybe you've seen a few of them out at the meetup. There's this like 5-person company going, we've got a $17 billion industry. We're going to get it all. And you go and go, how? It's not really about market size. It's about market share. And I promise you, no matter how smart or slick every founder is, they're probably going to run into some sort of unforeseen barrier that is going to stop them from some sort of hurdle. And I mean, at the end of the day, one of the things you're going to want to identify is, are there hurdles, are there things that are going to get in the way of this business getting ahead, which is also going to leave me in a tight spot? So how have they gotten to the point that they are? Where are they going to be next? Are they, to use a cliche everybody probably knows, have they crossed the chasm yet? Have they already gone from those really early stage adopters to that majority where they're really going to take off, which is where I want to get in, especially if I've got risk to worry about. And if they've already gotten over some of these hurdles and they've got this big roadblock, will that roadblock or that unforeseen barrier to entry also prevent other people? Because if so, then you've got a little bit more of a likely shot that that's going to be a viable startup that you really want to be part of. And how did they get there? Did they jump on board after another company had already failed? And if they are using that, a good thing to ask is, okay, what did you learn from that other company? Are you guys going to make the same mistakes as everybody else? Or are you trying to build your own market, which has its own trials and tribulations? There's going to be a lot of roadblocks to that. On that one specifically, I think the guys from Included did a whole 1-hour presentation that might be good to look into. But if you're going to a company that's theoretically trying to build their own market, are they trying to solve a deep underlying pain point? Or is the problem that they're solving a little bit more superficial? If it's superficial, be a little worried. Make sure that they're not just being yet another really, really enthusiastic feature company. And the solution that they're building, is it 10 times better than what else is out there? So I guarantee you, if you have something that's like, hey, we've got faster horses, you're not going to be that startup that was Ford. To use another complete cliche. Now, once you know where the company is, what their original model was, sometimes it might be fun to ask a few questions on how did they get there. What was the methodology to figure out, okay, this is the business that we are doing, that it's going to be successful? Personally, I mean, for really early stage startups, I like the lean methodology, but I mean, I'm not actually an expert in building up startups, so there are many different ways of looking at, okay, this could be a successful company that I want to join. It's just one. Now, once you figured out what kind of business that they have, you've asked them, okay, how did they get there? You look at the market and go, are there any 800-pound gorillas? And I propose an 800-pound gorilla, at least in the traditional sense, was what are the companies that are out there that could absolutely crush our startup or the startup that I'm joining, which means they're going to be out of business in December. These days, Nick, I would argue that the 800-pound gorilla, if you're looking at it from an employment standpoint, is actually who's going to acquire it? And am I going to enjoy being acquired? Because, I mean, hell, it's great for people like me when everybody gets acquired and a whole bunch of people jump ship. But if you're thinking about joining a company that could theoretically be close to acquisition, think, am I going to want to work for the company that hires them? I mean, this is a great social analytics company, but am I going to fit in with, say, IBM if they buy us? And what's that going to look like for me? Again, there's no right or wrong answers here. These are just questions that you should ask yourself and your employer and just have in the back of your mind. Because at the end of the day, how well you fit in with the culture readily and as you go is going to be a huge thing. As I said at the start of this presentation, it's all about your return on experience, and how happy you are every day is going to be your return on, a large portion of your return on experience, the dividends that you get every day. Now, last but certainly not least, there's this great saying, bet on the horse. I mean, don't bet on the horse. The company you join, the most important thing is the leadership. I mean, you can throw away every other point if you've got leadership that has business acumen, operational experience, and that sort of technical knowledge. Like, have they executed before? Do they really know the industry? I mean, like, you're building in fintech. Have they been in financial technology for 20 years? And are they going to support you and mentor you and help you grow? If so, and if you depending on what your mortgage looks like, it might be worth taking that little bit of a risk. I've recently made a slight move of my own. Here's my contact info if anybody wants to reach out to me later. Any questions?